Like and subscribe right now, or this spider will crawl on your face when you're sleeping.
10 worst cruise ship events. When we think of cruise ship disasters, what mostly comes to mind is the Titanic. You know, the one in which James Cameron directed the 1997 blockbuster romance film that shed light on this catastrophic disaster. But don't let the blossoming, bittersweet love between Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet fool you. The Titanic was a tragedy beyond your wildest dreams. Strangely, despite all its popularity, the Titanic isn't even the deadliest cruise ship event in the world. Yes, there have been some maritime misadventures that are worthy of their own horror, or even comedy film. With this in mind, let's take a look at 10 of the deadliest cruise ship disasters in history. Not only did they result in the loss of millions of dollars worth of property, but they also claimed the lives of hundreds. Number 10. Seaborne Spirit. It is November 2005. A luxury cruise ship is making its way through the Indian Ocean off the coast of Somalia. Suddenly, the cruise ship is attacked by 2 boats swarming with pirates. As the pirate boats approach the Seaborne Spirit, the pirates emerge firing machine guns as well as throwing handheld rocket-propelled grenades. During the attack, one of the crew members is seriously injured by shrapnel.
How did you feel when it happened with the Somalis?
Very scary.
As a countermeasure on the attack, the crew uses a long-range acoustic device, LRAD, that blasts a series of powerful sound waves to deter the attackers. It works, and the crew manages to escape the horrendous ordeal. Today, the ship has been renamed the Starbreeze. It was also the inspiration behind the 2013 Hollywood blockbuster film, Captain Phillips. Before we move on, I've got a little challenge for you that'll take 5 seconds to complete. So here's the deal. You just leave a like on this video, smash that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell, and you will get 25 years of amazing luck. Try it really works. Number 9. MTS OCEANOS. The MTS OCEANOS first hit the waves in 1952. Constructed in France, it was later sold to a Greek company in 1976. On August 3, 1991, the MTS OCEANOS set sail for East London, South Africa, before heading north to Durban under the leadership of then-captain Yanis Avranis. While on sea, the ship headed into strong winds, and therefore, the outdoor party that had British entertainers Moss and Tracy Hills had to be moved into an indoor lounge. By night, the raging seas were wreaking havoc, rolling the ship violently from side to side. Eventually, the waste disposal system could take no more, and it exploded. This led to wastewater flooding to the generator room, resulting in the generator shutting down and leaving the ship adrift in total darkness. A distress call was conveyed, and in response, a few South African helicopters and a Dutch container ship came to the aid. Surprisingly, the captain and crew members were the first individuals to be airlifted to shore, leaving the entertainment staff to coordinate the rescue efforts and help passengers to safety all on their own. All 571 passengers and crew members were saved by the time the ship sank nose first into the sea. But it was a stark reminder that sometimes, as a passenger, you've got to fend for yourself. Number 8. Royal Caribbean's Explorer of the Seas. A cruise ship might just feel like an oasis away from the hustle and bustle of city life, but it can also be a recipe for disaster, especially if the onset of a virus ravages the passengers. In 2014, the Royal Caribbean's Explorer of the Seas cruise from New Jersey to the Caribbean earned the infamous title of being the sickest passenger cruise ship than any other boat since the CDC started tracking records more than 2 decades ago. When all was said and done, more than 700 passengers and crew members fell ill due to a norovirus that spread rapidly through the ship, causing inflammation of the stomach and large intestines. Which goes to show that even if you're having fun on a cruise ship, don't forget to bring your sanitary manners from home. Make sure to always wash your hands and mind what you eat. Bacteria and viruses can easily be spread through contact with ship railings, bathroom doors, and buffet food. Number 7. SS MORRO Castle. The tragedy of the SS MORRO Castle is one of the most dreadful cruise ship events in history. I'm still surprised that no Hollywood producer has turned it into a heartbreaking thriller. Actually, there was a script that was co-written by director Fritz Lang called Hell Afloat, but the actual movie was never made. Between 1930 to 1934, the SS Morro Castle occasionally shuttled more than 480 passengers between New York and Havana. While on board, passengers could forget about the stresses of depression and prohibition that haunted their days, meaning that booze flowed freely in parties hosted on the boat. However, tragedy struck in September of 1934 during a return sail from Cuba to the Big Apple. Steered by Captain Robert Wilmot, he complained of stomach aches after eating a dinner and retiring to his cabin. He was later found motionless, reported to have died of a heart attack. Chief Officer William Worms took charge of the ship, and a few hours later, at about 3 a.m., a fire started in one of the storage lockers. The crew tried everything to put the fire out, but their haphazard and reckless attempts only served to fuel the fire. Eventually, the blaze ran amok and consumed adjacent rooms. Crew members were forced to abandon the ship, leaving confused passengers to fend for themselves in the dark, smoky hallways. Rescuers stationed themselves on the Jersey shore looking to receive the lifeboats carrying the passengers who had gotten lucky. By morning, the charred hull of the SS Morro was grounded at Asbury Park, New Jersey. From the 549 people on board, 86 guests and 49 crew members lost their lives. Number 6. Royal Pacific. During its first launch in 1964, the Royal Pacific was dubbed as the quintessential passenger ferry, carrying about 250 passengers, 91 cars, and 16 trucks. It was later converted into a cruise ship in the late 1980s. During its first maiden voyage as a cruise liner, it left from Singapore and sailed to Phuket, then Malacca, and finally to Penang before making the journey back home. Around 2 a.m., while everyone was fast asleep, the crew and passengers heard a loud bang, followed by the terrifying sound of metal screeching and clunking. It turns out that a Taiwanese trawler, Turfu 51, had accidentally rammed into the ship, leaving a massive hole in the cruise liner's side. Because the PA system wasn't working properly on the boat, it wasn't easy for the disaster to be communicated properly to all members and passengers of the ship. By the time assistance from the mainland had arrived, more than 30 confirmed deaths and 70 injuries were reported. Number 5. SS Eastland. The SS Eastland was a passenger ship based in Chicago and extensively used for tours. Although the ship had been recorded to have tilting since it was first manufactured, some measures had been put in place to rectify this issue. Nevertheless, the SS Eastland still suffered from being top-heavy when boarding for a cruise in 1915. Why the issue was not properly addressed before launching is still a puzzle to this day. The ship was scheduled to sail from Chicago to Michigan City, Indiana, transporting workers from Western Electric Company's Hawthorne Works for a picnic. On July 24, 1915, a total of 2,572 passengers boarded the ship, with a majority of them congregating on the open upper decks. While still docked, the ship began to tilt to one side before suddenly rolling and toppling over. So unprepared and shocked were the passengers that despite the river's bottom being merely 20 feet below, more than 844 passengers and crew members lost their lives. 22 American families were lost that day. Number 4. Costa Concordia. One of the largest passenger cruise ships ever wrecked, the Costa Concordia was massive, boasting 17 decks, 6 restaurants, a 3-story theater, and enough room for 4,200 vacationers. On January 13, 2012, Captain Francesco Chetno agreed to a request by the ship's chief maitre d', Antonello Tiavelli, and sailed closer to the island of Isola del Giglio. What was the reason for this? Well, apparently Tiavelli, who was a native of Giglio, wanted to impress and greet the local residents. In an act of stupidity, Captain Chetno turned off the ship's alarm and computer navigation system, and later confessed that he thought he knew the waters well enough to navigate by sight along the coast. Wow, talk about reaching blindly in the dark. Tragedy ensued soon after when the Costa Concordia struck an underwater rock, capsizing and killing 32 passengers. And the worst thing about it all? Captain Shetno literally jumped ship, abandoning all 300 passengers that were on board during the disaster. He even failed to heed instructions from a Coast Guard officer who had advised him to get back on board. He was later convicted for manslaughter and sentenced to 16 years in prison. Number 3. Carnival Cruise Line's triumph. Let's face it, there's nothing as bad as a fire on a cruise ship in the middle of an ocean, and that's exactly what the passengers of the Carnival Cruise Triumph found out the hard way. A generator fire suddenly transformed the luxury liner from paradise to hell in one of the most hilarious ways. With the generator not working, the bathrooms and toilets were unable to pump water. This meant that passengers had to drop their, extras into red bags labeled hazardous waste and stuff them into garbage cans they left in the hallway. The ordeal was so horrific and disgusting that the cruise ship was infamously dubbed the Poop Cruise. Passengers narrated seeing carpets soaked with more than 3 inches of all sorts of waste and excrement you could imagine. And with all the shrimp and lobster on a cruise line, you can only imagine... I don't even want to go any further. The passengers had to endure the horror for 4 whole days before the Triumph was finally towed from the Gulf of Mexico to Mobile, Alabama. The smell was so bad that people on the docks could smell the pungent toxic waste from a mile away. I don't know about you, but if I was one of the staff members at the Triumph, I would demand a raise as soon as I got to the shore. And now we've come to the best pick of the day. This picture was submitted by one of our subscribers from Maine. What do you think about it? Is it possible for a boat to topple over to such an extent? Probably not, as most cruise liners are usually constructed to have a low cog and rarely topple over, especially in such calm waters. Number 2. RMS Titanic. Hello, darkness, my old friend. We meet again. Yes, the Titanic is what many would consider the mother of all ironies. When it was first constructed, many experts in 1912 considered it unsinkable. Oh boy, little did they know how fate planned to prove them wrong, and specifically on the boat's maiden voyage from Southampton to New York City. Engineer Thomas Andrews had put his heart and soul into designing the ship to withstand any kind of head-on collision or rammings from another ship. Unfortunately, nature had far more ferocious cogs in the works that would render all his efforts futile. On that fateful day, a North Atlantic Ocean iceberg struck the vessel and scraped through 5 of its watertight compartments. Legend has it that if it had only scraped through 4, the boat would have most likely have remained afloat. Additionally, just like many ships of the time, the Titanic's lifeboats were designed to transfer passengers to nearby rescue ships, not to ferry them to shore. Sadly, in a time when rescue planes were non-existent, help was many hours away. The boat went under in the wee hours of April 15th. More than 1,500 people lost their lives that day, with most dying in the grip of the cold, icy waters as they waited for help. And number 1, MV Wilhelm Gustloff. Have you ever wondered what the deadliest cruise ship disaster is in modern history? Well, look no further, as the MV Wilhelm Gustloff was a tragedy of inexplicable proportions. And what's even more devastating is that this catastrophe was intentional, a calculated plan. The MV Wilhelm Gustloff was a cruise ship built for World War II-era Germany's tourism organization, but was later converted into a hospital ship for the German Navy and floating barracks. By January of 1945, the Germans were losing the largest modern war in history. As the Russians gained ground, their navy approached the MV Wilhelm. On that fateful morning, more than 10,582 Germans were packed into a boat designed to carry only 1,900 passengers. The boat held German army officers, wounded soldiers, and thousands of civilians, many of whom were children. When a Russian submarine saw the Gustloff, which was moving slowly and had no markings of a hospital boat, they fired 3 torpedoes at it. Because many of the lifeboats had been frozen due to the water, there wasn't enough time to get most of them out to sea. Of the 10,000 passengers on board, over 9,000 lost their lives that very day in the cold, bone-chilling waters. The death toll was more than 6 times that of the Titanic. With that being said, we bet you're now a little scared of heading for a cruise ship vacation, huh? Let us know in the comment section down below if you ever plan on boarding a ship again. Want more videos that would probably still exist until the end of time? Click on any of the videos you see on the screen. As always, thanks for watching.